Hi, welcome everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. There's a few more people to admit into the room, so we'll just get started shortly. Okay, I think we've got everybody in. I'm sure there'll be a few more coming, but we'll get started. So welcome to our webinar or our workshop this afternoon on community engagement stronger together. And I say this afternoon because I'm in Ontario, but I know not everyone else is. So wherever your time zone is, welcome. My name is Nancy Dubois, and it's been my pleasure to work on this gender equity project with CPRA for the last couple of years leading up to these workshops. And we'll tell you a little bit more about the project as we get started into the workshop. I did want to mention that with what's going on in the world these days, that as a collective and CPRA in particular, we are standing with Ukraine and thinking of them as we go through these troubles internationally. I'm going to take a moment in a minute to introduce my co-facilitator for today. But before we do, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on our technology to make sure people are comfortable. I'm sure you're zoomed out by now, but just in case, you will, if you wouldn't mind keeping yourself on mute as you come into the session, but please feel free to open up your audio when there's some discussion or you want to ask a question or whatever. We would really encourage you to be as interactive as possible today. The video, if you are able to turn your camera on, it's so much easier and nicer to present to a group. I know some of you don't have a camera or whatnot, but if it is a possibility, it's so much easier for Claire and the rest of us to speak to faces instead of black squares. Most of you have got your names on your picture or your square. That's great. Thank you for that. Just to let you know that you do have a choice with how you view the screen. We will be using slides for the most part of the session. So that sliding bar in the middle of your screen can make either the people bigger or the slides bigger. And you can go into different views with the indicator at the top of your screen. If you would mind not putting into the chat box any URLs unless you check with us first. They can sometimes carry a virus with them, so we want to just be sure. We will probably post some up there as we go along for different websites and things, but do check with us if you wouldn't mind first. Last couple. One is that if you are wanting to ask a question as we go through or offer a comment, there's a little box here at the bottom right-hand corner of your slide where you'll see this pop up at the bottom of your screen under the reactions icon, and you'll see there where you can raise your hand. So depending on how many of us there are in the session, we may not see your square or your face on the screen if it goes over onto a second screen. So that raising your hand lets us know and puts you in a queue so that we know who's asked the question and in what order. So that's really helpful. As you probably noticed as you came in, we are recording the session today, and this will be up on the CPRA website in the toolkit that's been created for this project, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in a couple of places through today. So before we get into the further discussion on the topic for today, I wanted to share with you a video that our National Program Director, Aaron Love, has prepared as an introduction for today's session. So MJ, if you could carry us away on the, on the video, that would be great.
Hi, and welcome. My name is Erin Love. I'm the Director of National Programs at the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. I'm very pleased to welcome you today to the Gender Equity in Recreational Sport Workshop Series, focusing on optimizing facility use and design. These workshops are a culmination of efforts that over the last year and a bit have involved an environmental scan, literature review, key informant interviews, and surveys involving researchers and recreation practitioners across Canada and internationally. Before we begin, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to CPRA and the work that we're doing focusing on gender equity in recreational sport. As many of you may know, the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association is the national organization dedicated to realizing the full potential of parks and recreation as major contributors to community health and vibrancy. CPRA is a voice. We're the national voice for parks and recreation, advancing the collective interests of our members. CPRA is a community. We're a national network dedicated to the well-being of people, communities in the natural and built environments. We are also a resource. So CPRA is a resource for the sector, and we contribute knowledge and opportunities to enhance growth. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well as I introduce the bench to you in a few slides. What makes CPRA so special is that we are a collective network of the 13 provincial and territorial parks and recreation associations across Canada. They make up our membership. And our strength really comes from the experience, the expertise, and the network of the staff and board members that we have across this great country. We also work with volunteers, government partners, a number of allied health sector partners as well, such as public health, education, sport, physical activity, and a whole host of other groups. They help us progress on our goals, and in turn, we strive to help them meet theirs. CPRA has a virtual office with about 8 staff. And although the staff work remotely, the CPRA National Office is located on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Métis First Nations. We acknowledge the historical oppression of the lands, cultures, and the peoples in what we now know as Canada. And we aim to contribute to the healing and decolonizing journey that we all share together. So a moment ago, I referenced the bench. The bench is an online community that CPRA launched in the summer of 2020. It's a place for the sector to meet, to grow, to work, to share together. And the bench features a whole host of different tools and resources. It's an events or a list of upcoming events. There are discussion groups, one in particular that's focused on gender equity. There are portals dedicated to specific projects, such as the Framework for Recreation in Canada and Parks for All. There are some professional development opportunities, and as well as COVID-19 and other resources. As the bench grows, you'll also find other discussion groups start to pop up. So we really encourage you to sign up for the bench, take a look around, join some discussion forums if some spark your interest. You'll also find some templates, some tools, some guidelines, and other documents to help you in the work that you're doing. And here's a video of the bench. CPRA's current project that focuses on gender equity in recreational sport was funded back in November 2019. This funding came from the Government of Canada, from Sport Canada at the time, to increase participation and retention of women and girls in recreational sport in Canada. Through our work and over the past few years, we still, of course, focus on girls and women, but we've included non-binary folks as well in the work that we do. Our key populations for this work are girls aged 9 to 15, new moms or women in the postpartum period, older adults 55 and up, as well as girls and women with intersecting identity factors. And what we know is that these key priority groups face additional barriers to participation and retention. And the work that we're doing helps to address those and remove them. CPRA, as part of this work, has designed and delivered a number of different pieces to this project. So there is a facility use and design toolkit, of which this webinar series will be a part. There are other workshops that we've delivered in partnership with Canadian Women in Sport and some local facilitators across the country. We have also delivered a webinar series. You'll find all of this on our website and on our YouTube page. We've worked as well with High Five. Many of you may know the High Five training program, and we've enhanced High Five Sport module and also developed 4 new modules that practitioners can take. They're free, and I encourage you to check those out as well. We've also offered some community grants through this work. Those have gone to grassroots efforts across Canada to address those barriers that women, girls, and non-binary people face when participating in sport and recreation. There's a whole host of work that CPRA is doing in this area, and we would like to thank our partner, the Government of Canada, for funding to do all of these initiatives. This funding or this project supports the 2018 federal funding commitment to achieve gender equity in sport at every level by 2035. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague and our workshop facilitator. I wish you all the best on this webinar, and I look forward to seeing you all on the bench.
Thanks to Erin, although she's not here, but thank you in spirit. I just wondered if anyone had any questions about what you've just seen and heard from Erin around CPRA in general, the Gender Equity Project, or the series of workshops. Anything that you'd like to know more about? Nope. Okay, let's move on. So it's my pleasure now to introduce to you my colleague in this gender equity work with CPRA, Krista Costas Bradstreet. So Krista, over to you.
Thanks, Nancy. Hi, everyone. I hope you can see me okay. I'm sitting in a lovely cottage in the eastern townships of Quebec today. So it's great, nice and cold here, but great to be with you. I just am going to very quickly walk you through or introduce you to the Framework for Recreation in Canada. I think that for some of you, it might be familiar. For others, it might be new. It was actually released in 2015 after about 4 years of consultation across the country. And the framework really guides the work that we do in the recreation sector. So there are 5 goals, and you can see them there: active living, access and inclusion, access to the outdoors, supportive environments, and recreation capacity. Where this series of workshops falls, and also our gender equity project in general, is under access and inclusion. There are 8 priorities, of which women and girls are one. So all of the work that CPRA tries to do fall under these, and we really encourage those of you who work in the recreation sector to take a look at the framework and let it guide the work that you're doing, and possibly even guide some of the strategic planning that your organizations are doing. We'll let you know that this document does go until 2025. And at that point, we will be looking to revitalize this document in light of the current priorities, some of the learnings from the pandemic. So you will see some information coming out in the next few months about how we go from now until 2025 with this document. And then, as I mentioned, there'll be a whole new document to look forward to starting in 2035. So that's the Framework for Recreation in Canada. And if you have any questions about how to find it, get in touch with us, or you can go to cpra.ca, and it's on our website as well as on the bench that Erin just talked about. So I think I'm going to now take the opportunity to introduce you to our facilitator for today, and that is Claire Tucker-Reid. Claire is a recreation and sport consultant in Ontario, specializing in master plans, policy development, organizational assessments, and service delivery reviews. She's enjoyed a stellar career in public service and is known for always reaching higher. Her work typically emphasizes her dedication to including the voices of marginalized residents and staff, And some of the highlights of Claire's career, and there are a lot of them, so you should all go get a coffee. Claire hosted the premier municipal race relations conference in Ontario for the city of Markham in 1989. It was the first real opportunity for all residents to come together and speak about a joint and a continued collective approach for including all residents within the community. As Commissioner of Public Works, Claire worked on all of the garbage, street, animal control, roads, water, forestry, and parks crews to better understand each staff member's work, to build stronger relationships and capture staff needs in forming a high-performing team. Claire developed the first diversity and community engagement plan for the town of Ajax by having all underrepresented voices at the table, creating a long-term opportunity for groups to support each other and respect everyone's need to be seen and belong. And finally, Claire is currently completing a chapter in a book through the Global Leadership Institute on Courageous Women in Leadership. The book speaks to women's experiences and leadership challenges and is authored by contributors from Zimbabwe, South Africa, Canada, the Netherlands, and the United States. So I'm really pleased to pass over the rest of the workshop to Claire and Nancy, and I wish you all a really good learning experience today.
Thanks, Nancy. Hello, everyone. I forgot about working on those garbage trucks. That wasn't a great experience personally. Before I begin, I want to thank Nancy, Erin, Krista, and MJ. This work on gender equity in recreation and sport, it has taken a significant amount of effort. It's been very thorough. They've involved a nationwide reference group of early adopters, completed an international literature search, consulted the field on current and future needs, and it's an impressive body of work. So on behalf of girls, women, and gender diverse people in the field of sport and recreation, we extend our thank you. We understand you have continued expectations and funding, so we're looking forward to the next steps and how we can move this agenda forward. We know that increasing female participation in recreation and sport takes multiple interventions at many levels, and it competes with a myriad of other priorities at the community level. But we aim to keep it on the agenda, make the case for continued focus and resources. So in terms of moving on with the workshop, as outlined, practitioners wanted to hear more about specific topics, i.e. facility design, i.e. evaluation, how to build a strong culture within your organization and with other organizations to move this work forward. But as well, the other topic was around community engagement. So I'll be speaking briefly about gathering data within your own context or geography. What do you need to know? Developing key messages. What are the key findings? What can you capture in 3 or 4 lines? The status of female participation in sport and recreation in your organization or community. And then starting where you are at. And the Canadian Women in Sport have great resources. 2 come to mind right off the bat to help you with that assessment. One is called Same Game, and the other one is called the Temperature Check. And then we'll talk more about community engagement, why we engage, what methodology to use, what our role is within each engagement approach. And I'd like to talk quickly about collective impact. And there's a model around how we work together with other organizations, other levels of government, et cetera, and how we develop a common vision. We all play our part, and we've seen some remarkable results of taking this approach of working more collectively. I'd also like to share some promising practices that have been a result of both community engagement and collective impact efforts. Then we'll have some opportunities to discuss our thoughts around key themes and share with the broader group. As I said earlier, please do visit Canadian Women in Sport. They have a tremendous amount of resources. They're very friendly, deal with different topics that will help you along your journey. So the issue is, and we need to know these statistics in terms of setting context within our communities, and within those discussions with other interested groups. But 28% of girls, women, and gender diverse people participate in sport. However, 62% do not. And in 1992, half of females over 15 were participating. And that's declined, as you can see, significantly in the last 3 decades. To exacerbate this issue even further, 500,000 women have dropped out of the workforce during COVID-19 for varying reasons, whether they lost their jobs, were needed to be primary caregivers, etc. That's an astounding number for our country, and we need to engage these women and females back into recreation and sport to give them that confidence and that emotional stability that is a benefit, of course, of participating. Exercise may or may not be their first priority, but I think we should be tapping into that community. And 1 in 4 females are not committed to returning to sport after post-COVID-19. So there isn't a great commitment. We'll see. I think it will just take a lot of time and more effort, but you can see that we're already behind in terms of equitable participation. The bar's moved even further back because of COVID, and we've got to start moving forward to at least gain the same momentum we had pre-pandemic. These statistics are alarming. They'll require institutions to develop immediate interventions to re-engage females, and it will take more time given the pandemic. We've had many consultations with municipalities, and they're saying, you know, give us some time. There are many other priorities, i.e. getting facilities open, for example. So what's our collective call to action? Well, now more than ever, we need to address and keep our focus on achieving gender equity in sport and recreation. Many practitioners have been focused on the same issues since the late 70s, or for over 4 decades. And we have made some progress in terms of policy, outreach, resources, and engagement with females. But given that the pandemic has lowered the participation rates to an even greater extent, we need to, as a community of agencies and institutions that care, to increase our energies and work with like partners. While we can say that we tend to provide spaces, policies, and direct learn-to programs and to support to our community groups, can we say that we're placing specific emphasis on gender equity? I think the days are long gone where service providers can say, our services are open to everyone. Our programs are open. We offer females only swim. And frankly, as a consultant, I hear a lot of that. And we hope that even numbers of males and females will attend, but we have to be much more intentional now. We can't sit back and just develop an equitable program and hope that people show up. We've got to jump from behind our desks, visually audit our public spaces, review our allocation statistics, and meet with those individuals and groups that are not represented and find out how we address these barriers. We've got to ensure that our programs and services are seen as welcoming and safe for all. And the Canadian government has a goal to achieve gender equity in sport by the year 2035, which is a very aggressive target. And we've clearly got to do some work to do as practitioners. Just want to talk about 3 steps. I mean, I'm not sure where everybody's starting along this journey. You may have been at it for years. You may be just investigating what you should do. And I want to just talk about how you gain momentum before you go out and engage the public and other organizations. So in gaining momentum, I would say gather data, develop your key messages, and then start where you're at. As a first step or a renewed step, we've got to understand our current state of increasing female participation. We've got to gather the information, develop the key messages about where your organization is and can assist in increasing that participation. Let's talk about knowing your community in terms of gathering data. Next one. There we go. In gathering information about your community, at a high level, we should be using Census Canada information with respect to gender breakdown, numbers by age cohorts, including any other regional and municipal population growth projections. So be really clear about the number of females in various age cohorts, whether that's growing or decreasing. And secondly, I'd seek to understand who might be underrepresented in sport and recreation by applying, again, some census data about persons living in the lower income measure. What's the percentage in your community? How can you get those folks engaged? As well, the population that identifies as BIPOC, there are very specific barriers that these folks are feeling, and being aware of the initiatives that groups are taking to feel a part of the system. Being part of the LGBTQI2S community, currently in Canada, 13% of the population identify as this community, and as well understanding persons with disabilities and the numbers, what's in play, how are they engaged, how can they be better engaged. And these are broadly the females that might not be able to navigate the system. They may not feel welcome or be able to advocate for the supports that they need. And I'd also inventory the groups and agencies that support underrepresented populations and any current programs and initiatives that serve to reach out and better include marginalized females. As well, are there any specific areas in the neighborhood and the community that are priority neighborhoods at risk, or might include higher percentage of persons with lower levels of education and income? These are the areas that may be well supported already or may require some further interventions and initiatives and programs where they live. Knowing participation numbers would be ideal, but usually requires developing a common template and getting people to populate the template. That takes time, but it's a very important step. I'd collect information on what exists already in terms of programs and events that could extend some portion to include more females. Understanding participation rates over the last 3 years will assist in understanding participation patterns. Are there more females in sport and recreation? Are there fewer? It's a specific age group. And again, it does take a while to collect this data. More importantly, this work will help us better understand the gap between more privileged females and those who face barriers. Our goal is to gain a wider range of participants who have seldom felt welcome or part of sport and recreation in Canada. And these, in my opinion, require focus first, pardon me. Knowing your organization. Having a mandate and leadership that expects movement on the gender equity agenda is the winning formula. If you have the mandate and you have a commissioner or director or manager that has clear expectations, targets, and a plan, that's the winning formula. Dedicated resources would be even better. And you know, it's not a matter of luxury to be able to focus on this work. It's not a matter of, you know, we may or may not choose to do it. We have a mandate through the human rights legislation where we cannot create barriers to participation. And in my experience, auditing who is using your space is a critical step in understanding who's missing and who to target and what policies to review and what actions to take. When the town of Ajax developed their first diversity and community engagement plan, we spent a good amount of time understanding the overall demographics and auditing public spaces, and especially at special events where everybody was welcome, the full community was welcome to celebrate together. The study steering committee reflected the community. We had every background. It was an incredible experience. We spent a lot of time developing what our collective culture was, what are our behaviors, what behaviors were acceptable and not acceptable. And in the long run, we didn't advocate, or people weren't advocating for their own groups. We were advocating for each other. We all wanted to see underrepresented populations more represented in recreation. So the steering committee reflected the community, offered their observations as to why these events may not be welcoming, because they didn't see themselves with the attendees. They didn't see themselves in the organizers. They didn't see themselves in the events, the food that was served, etc. And these observations shaped how events and facilities could become more welcoming. So pretty powerful by just walking along and taking mental notes of who's in your facilities, parks and events, and who is not. Knowing your organization and, just the point I just wanted to make was just get your numbers, get your data, understand what the gaps are, define the issues, and audit your spaces. So the next slide, we're going to break out into groups, and we'll all discuss the first 3 questions. So what are the key questions that you have about gender equity in recreation and sport within your community? What do you need to know that you don't know already? What data sources and organizations would you use to answer these questions? And what are your current key messages within your organization? At that point, we'll come back and we're just going to do a poll in terms of, do you feel that you're at the beginning of the process? Do you feel that you're sort of in the middle? You've changed some policies and you're starting to see, gather some people together and see results? Or do you feel that you are in a mature state? I'd just like to get a sense of where people are at within the workshop. So I think we'll take about 15 minutes for discussion and report back at that point. And Nancy, could you divide us into groups?
Certainly, I've got it ready to go. Claire, you're going to be with room 1. Krista, you're with room 2. MJ, if you could assign yourself to room 3, and I will take room 4. There's one person that's just joined us, and so I'll assign them as we start these processes. So does anyone have any questions about what you're being asked to consider over the next little while? Nope. Facilitators, just make sure that you've got these 3 questions in front of you as we go into the groups, because you won't see this slide when we break out. Okay, I will prompt you about every 5 minutes to switch to the next question if you haven't already, and then you'll have a minute warning at the end to wrap things up. Claire, is there anything else you want to add before we go?
No, thanks so much.
Okay, here we go. Have some fun.
There we go. So Krista, could you report out for your group?
I don't know. We had a very good and long conversation. I took as many notes as I could. So I'll do my best. And anybody in my group, feel free to jump in. So, and we didn't even, I'll just put it right up there. We didn't even get to question 3. So I'm going to tell you about question 1 and question 2. So in terms of question 1 around what we're needing to find out, we had a long discussion around the fact that, again, a lot of communities using that historical or basing facility use on the history and how things have always been done. And so therefore it tends to lean towards or skew towards male dominated sports. And we talked about, and how much of, we know it's happening, but how much of the community knows that that's happening? Are they watching, and then what are they doing about it? But they may not even know. And in one of the communities, we talked about the fact that only 5 ice times were designated for women and sports requiring ice time. So, but also, so in some cases, women were, and I guess this is in Dana's case in New Brunswick, some of the women's groups sort of split off and said, well, I'm not going to get here what I need. And this wasn't arenas, this was more field time. And in so doing, ended up having multiple leagues. So the game really grew. So it wasn't, they were being constrained by what was happening in terms of a traditional way of assigning field time. And so they took matters into their own hands and ended up really growing sports, really growing the sport. So yeah, again, we talked about the fact that are the numbers showing growth? And if the numbers are showing growth in a certain sport for women, then why aren't we designating why aren't we designating our facility use in the same way? So we need to be louder voices. We need to sort of get out to our communities that we're growing this together, and that we're going to be a stronger community growing sport together. Let me just take a quick, before I go on to question 2, is there anything else from my group that I'm missing? I would also mention the fact that when we do have policies in place, while they are sometimes hard to actually enact, the fact that we have them is a strength. So at least we can rely on that when city council starts to get phone calls about why are you switching up what we're doing in our arenas and on our field. So having that policy behind us is a really positive thing. And then around question 2, in terms of where we're getting data, we did talk about the fact that there's a ton of information, but where do we find this? Where do we go? Where's that source to get all of this different information, the right information, the current information, and then looking at how we make sure we can engage our partners with some of this information to help with recruitment and retention of women and girls in sport. How do we engage our partners at the community level around awareness and education? And just the thought that, again, we often have sources for national data, but we don't have those local sources. I did mention the work of the Canadian Fitness and Lifestyle Research Institute, CFLRI, which has a provincial and territorial level data that you can go in and manipulate on your own and find some of that information. I think that's it. Anything else that I didn't add or could have said more eloquently? As I'm scrambling reading notes.
Great. Thanks, Krista. MJ.
I laugh and I'm like about to scramble and read my notes as well. So in our group, we had a very good discussion around the key questions they were asking really was to help determine how to drive that larger principle, because a lot of people were in that stage where they're sort of building their strategic plan and trying to move from just having a plan to something that they live in an everyday life. So it's really trying to understand what they currently have, trying to get to the point where there's some sort of responsibility to the user groups as well. We had a bit of discussion on whether we want to be prescriptive in some of the results we get back from this question. And I think like 2 people in our group are going to actually have more discussion about that, because some people like we want to be prescriptive, and we're also of the mind we also don't want to be too prescriptive. So we didn't quite land on a consensus on that particularly, but also more of the questions that we asked were with regards to building support within the programs. For example, trying to train women coaches so that you could have more to achieve that gender equity and then gender diversity. And it's not just women coaches for women teams, but you want for women coaches for women teams, but also for mixed sports as well. And in terms of where we getting the data sources, we're getting them directly from the municipality, particularly during that allocation process, just because it would help us to see exactly what they need and how that aligns with the program goals or the larger goal within that strategic plan. And some of the questions that we were asking were around sort of like, what's the makeup of the organization? What do they have in place to support equity seeking groups, particularly the intersectionality between those? For example, income disparity, where they're located. And then the key messaging is really around, the when you're trying to achieve gender diversity or gender equity, it's not just something that lives within your books, it's something that you have to sort of like live in your everyday life. So how do we sort of move towards that? So one interesting thing that came up in our group was around when we're collecting that information from the data sources around privacy concerns, because we want to ask certain things like age and where they're located, and that brings up a whole list of issues, and you have to go through privacy commissions. So the group is really interested in sort of a general discussion or more work around this, so that groups can really know how to deal with this, because we feel this would be something that becomes very important for the next few years. Now there are a lot of things are not just localized, but they're now online. So you really have to be very careful what you're asking people. I think that's it for our group. I don't know if I've left anything out.
Okay, great. Thank you. Nancy.
Sure. We had representation from East Coast to West Coast, literally right from end to end, as well as northern and large municipalities versus small ones. So really, really diverse group of people. So they're all obviously at different points. In Vancouver, we heard about a lot of the intensive work that's gone into inclusion in general and specifically around women and girls. Lots of initiatives. One was called the Queer Inclusion Initiative, funding for people to get into programs so that there's better access to sport and recreation, all kinds of different things happening. We heard about in Newfoundland and Labrador having just completed a needs assessment, particularly with Indigenous people around their interests in terms of physical activity. And mostly women completed that needs assessment, so they have a pretty good sense of where things are sitting with what people are interested in doing to get them engaged. And like Claire, when you were talking earlier about the stats on people not returning to activity, they're also seeing a drop in the people particularly women, not returning to volunteer. And so one of the recommendations that's coming out of their needs assessment, which is their primary data source right now, is to look at ways to get more paid leadership so that these programs can actually operate. In Montreal, we heard about the kind of focus right now on being able to provide financing to many priority population groups to be able to get them involved in sport and recreation. And right now they're in the process of how best to kind of make the decisions or set the criteria for that. So it's in the early stages there. And then we heard about Thunder Bay in Northern Ontario, again, in very early days with all of this. So some of their key questions were around how to do a more intentional approach towards women and girls in particular. Their priorities right now have been focused on anti-racism and the Indigenous population. And so perhaps moving more in the direction of girls, women, and gender diverse people. So with respect to data sources, I mentioned the needs assessment that was undertaken in one community. Vancouver has access to a particularly strong social policy department at the city and they're very well versed in being able to undertake data analysis and such. So they've got lots of internal supports to be able to rely on there. Montreal tends to focus on the StatsCan data that's available. And then in one other community, it was possible to track sort of as a baseline as they get started in all of this, looking at registration information and whether or not gender is captured within the program information. They don't capture that for other kinds of things like use of parks or large community events. So it would certainly just be about programs. We finished up with our key messages. There were a few of these. A couple people reinforced the need for transparency to the participants and to the general public, as well as to decision makers on how these things are moving forward, what's important, what's the strategy. And as Krista mentioned earlier, it's around, what are the policies that need to be put in place to keep these things sustainable. I mentioned a couple of these already. I'll point to one beacon sort of, or a principle that was identified by Vancouver around the Human Rights Code being such a key benchmark to sort of hang your hat on as to what's expected and what these expectations are that we should be trying to meet, because we don't have the same kind of legislation as what the United States have, but that the Human Rights Code is one that could be particularly helpful in guiding people. So if my group want to add anything to what I've summarized? Nope. Okay, there you have it.
Great. I'll finish off with our group. We were also well represented nationwide for the most part. But the key questions are, why are numbers so low? And how do we get enough girls, especially in a rural context? How do we get enough females to get momentum for teams, et cetera? And what are the best ways to engage more females? Another community is really looking at sport and focusing on sport and ensuring that females 12 to 18 are well supported in terms of resources, coaching, et cetera. And another question was, how can capital projects increase facility access to ensure that females feel more welcomed and supported? And one of the examples was being outdoors in parks where there may or may not be washrooms, and that's difficult for many females as well as males, but that would be a welcoming amenity. The sources for both of these most targeted around, let's go to the source. Let's go to the people actually using or not using recreation and sport facilities and programs. And so the target audience we felt was really girls and youth groups was one way to get to those in terms of a source. The schools, one community is going directly to the mosques and working with the mosque to say, what can we do within our sport and recreation system to accommodate and to encourage and support greater female participation? Another source was looking at what private facility operators have and how do they make those from a commercial perspective so welcoming, and can we adopt some of those amenities in a public setting? The key messages are interesting, but it's basically we care. We care as a group of practitioners. We are doing many things to include, we're seeing incremental results. And so, and I think that's progress in itself. The other point was we need to be able to pivot because priorities, things change quickly, and we have to be up to those things and understand them and know how to adopt or include those new interests within our program mix. And there was really another thought around older adults being more self-sufficient with a louder voice, often get heard first. That was a bit of a key message. And that's what we had to say. Any additions from our group? Terrific. I really like the way the different groups have handled these questions because there are different perspectives in each group, different perspectives by geography as we're hearing, a very strong knowledge of what resources exist and how to get to those resources, and then formulate all of that information and data into this is where we're at currently within trying to increase participation of females in sport and recreation. Wonderful, thank you for that. We'll have another opportunity in a few more slides. We're going to move on now to community engagement. Oh, sorry, no, we're not. We are going to move on to a poll. MJ, can you help us with this in terms of folks that you feel that you're at the beginning of the process in terms of doing preliminary work to increase? Do you feel you're at the midpoint, you've got some policies and some relationships and you're starting to move along this path? Or do you feel that you're in a mature state? You've got the policies, you've got momentum, you've got community groups engaged, you're working as a collective. So if you could participate in the poll, we will look at the results and do a bit of an analysis there.
I like that. I like that mid pint. Is that like mid pint of your beer when you're?
You can clearly tell what I was thinking.
We get it, MJ. Awesome. So it looks like it's sort of half and half pretty well. 57% really feel that they're at the beginning. And I think this is reflective of what we might find across Canada, that there's a clear interest, there's energy, but is there a plan? Do we have resources? That sort of thing. And that those are the bridges that Nancy and Krista's team are looking at. And then midpoint. So there are policies in place. It's clearly on the agenda. You're doing some work. You continue to pivot and respond to numbers and requests, et cetera. So it's pretty well half and half, a little more on the beginning side, but nobody in a mature state, which is interesting. You know, there are some municipalities that have been at this for decades, and I wonder where they would feel they're at in terms of successes and being along the continuum. Good show. Thank you very much. Okay, back to the presentation. Oops, there we go. We're going to talk about community engagement now, and we did have quite a few discussions around community engagement in our discussion groups. But I wanted to share this slide with you. Of course, we've all heard it, saying by Margaret Mead. Let me just get my, there. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I agree. I think it does take a small group to dream big, get the impetus, foresee a better future, but it takes many more to keep the momentum up over the decades. And engaging community along the path to gender equity in sport and recreation is and will continue to be critical. And together we will change the status quo. We just need to ensure that we're at it, and we encourage our successors to keep at it too. So I just want to talk about sort of a systems wide approach, what happens system wide. You can see there's interventions, individual actions, and organizational actions. I suspect we mean all three levels of government in terms of system-wide actions, sport and recreation governing bodies, major institutions, to really address those system-wide, high-level development of statistics to give us our status, also to develop tools to define what the key issues are. The system would include the federal government mandate regarding gender equity in sport by 2035, the national sport policy, CPRA's work to increase participation, Canadian women and sport assistance and resources. And the system is giving, I mean, the larger system in terms of legislation is giving us a mandate, capturing broader statistics that we get from our federal government and that we can apply locally. But supporting us with grants, audit tools, and encouragement, I think, is the system-wide responsibility. And we see that in Canada. I think we are well supported, in my view. Maybe we need to be more supported at the organizational level. But the organizational actions, I mean, this is where the rubber hits the road. I mean, it has to include a mandate, an overarching policy, an action plan, dedicated resources, and measured focus on the issue. While responsibility should lie with the person or group accountable for the results, I find that a community or departmental mandate of gender equity is clearly required. Otherwise, it's assumed that it's in place, it's happening, we just offer women-only programs, and we're really meeting our responsibility. And I think that is not meeting it, especially when we need to take special action to be more inclusive. Individual action, in my mind, should include knowing your starting point, which we've talked about today. Where are the inequities? How can these be quantified so that we can set targets and measure success? And even introducing physical literacy to all age groups in different settings can be a good starting point as those actions. I mean, it's something within your control, it's moving the agenda forward, and you can pick up from there. But you gotta know who you can work with to ensure that girls, women, and gender diverse people have the ability and the skills to participate. Creating that sense of belonging is also a step in retaining people and keeping them coming back. Your front desk is more important than you can ever know. And I know it's very difficult for the front desk to answer queries, direct people, probably register people at the same time. But when I go to a fitness center, I feel welcome when the front desk person knows my name. And we should be doing that as much as possible in community centers where we can. I mean, there's repeat customers, etc. I feel welcome when we catch up on a past conversation, or with staff come up and say, hi, we haven't met yet, my name is, and we might have a quick chat. I want people to make eye contact and welcome me back into this space. Then I feel that I belong and people are truly interested in me being there. And it takes a lot of training and reinforcement, but you can see that there's system-wide actions, organizational actions, and then individual actions that are really critical in welcoming and providing those safe spaces. I want to share a quick story about taking my granddaughter to school pre-pandemic and reinforcing how powerful simple gestures can be. I dropped Kensington off before the pandemic, and I was allowed to walk through the halls at that point. And as I was walking along the hall, there were about 25 stories handwritten by students emphasizing situations about coming out, changing gender identities, and bullying, where students felt vulnerable, but other students had come to help them. And these were thank you letters, in essence, about their situation and how their fellow students supported them. The authors were thanking those who helped them feel better and included. These were powerful testimonies about creating a safe environment. And it really made me think about how brilliant this could be in community centers, because we are trying to provide safe spaces. We are trying to create that sense of community. We are trying to be very welcoming. Can you imagine if there were similar testimonies in a community center where people felt included, engaged, where they may have felt vulnerable at a certain point? And this is exactly why we don't have as many females in sport and recreation. There's a fear. There's a fear of not being welcome. There's a fear of not being good enough. There's a fear of not having the right attire. There's a fear of being judged for being away from the home and not being where they are considered they belong. I won't comment on that. But then as I was reading these, Kensington's phys ed teacher walked by, Mr. Chong, and I love this man. He walks around with a beatbox. He wears fuzzy outfits. He's always getting kids to dance with him. And he knew who I am. He called me by name, and I'm only there once a week. And then he said, come and join my granddaughter's class in the warm-up, and running around the perimeter of the gym, me and all these kindergarten students. And how welcoming is that? I mean, I think that's truly an example of what a welcoming community center can mean. We get so wrapped up in the administration and everything, and maybe we need those volunteers, those precious volunteers, to be greeters in our centers. But you have to be intentional about welcoming. It can't be just about the flag's nice and there's a few flowers as you come in. It's got to be intentional, being outgoing, and including people, ensuring that they are welcome in the space. And all of that is to say that individual actions can speak volumes. So this best practices in community engagement is a checklist of sorts to ensure that your community engagement efforts can be as successful as possible. First and important, going out and making the effort to engage people where they feel most comfortable will garner the best results. I once had a youth worker who taught me a lot. Michelle dressed more like the youth she served, which, back then, which I don't know how long ago it was, but you expect your program staff to be dressing more office-like. And Michelle came in with overalls, screw earrings, literally through her ears. And it was her first day of work, and she requested to come and speak to me as the commissioner. And she said, don't expect me in the office much, all not according to my norm. And I said, okay. And she said, I'll be in the subway stations, I'll be in the parks, I'll be in the malls, I'll be wherever youth hang out. That's where I'm going to be. That's where I'm going to engage my target audience. And this approach was brilliant. I didn't see her much, but I saw significant results. She started a youth hotline run and operated by youth, where there was a real need in that community. She engaged girls in anti-oppression training and gender equity in sport and recreation. She started a clothing exchange run and operated by youth and food in a community center. We created some space because there was a need in that community, and she could empower youth to do that. She engaged youth in leadership training and increased their opportunities to gain work in sport and recreation. She increased their life chances using recreation and sport as a vehicle. She was successful in going to where youth are, gaining mutual trust and understanding, and look at the results she was able to achieve. She went to where youth hang out. That is a very important message. And we also need to be clear about our engagement intentions. Once I had the privilege of hosting a homeless choir from France and putting on a performance in Toronto. And it was an opportunity to connect with people living rough and hear about the barriers to recreation and sport that they were experiencing. We had community gardens for the homeless that were sponsored. We had a baseball league that was sponsored in this park, and there was shelters all around this park. So we advocated for council members to come to the park, where we had the baseball league and community garden plots, and the homeless people took folks on tours. But many people living rough attended the concert. And I contend that the conversations were more authentic and fruitful, given that the choir members were on their own turf, mixing with Torontonians living rough, and they were more comfortable there sharing their talents. They shared that with us afterwards. I also contend that the counselors gained a good sense of the strengths and challenges around increasing homeless participation in recreation and parks activities. So our intention was for council to meet people living rough where they are, to better understand the challenges of people living without homes and their participation in recreation and sport. As a result, we had a homeless strategy to increase more people living rough in parks and recreation that was well supported at council. So I think, you know, being strategic, but really understanding your engagement intentions is very important. So I think we'll move on to slide 18, Nancy. Okay, there we go. Early adopters or community champions are also critical in having influence, being enthusiastic, not about only this subject matter, but many subject matters. They influence a lot of people in the community, have connections, they're already engaged, they'll have ideas, they have resources or access to resources, and they're innovative. They tend to have been engaged in other community or civic issues. And so if you'll see at the bottom of the slide, you'll see that early adopters really influence the early majority. And I think that everybody knows who they are in their community, and they are readily accessible, are happy to help out for the most part. So not only go to where people are, but also engage those early adopters. They've worked on complex projects and before, and they can really help out. I want to just ask a question and just offer your input through the chat box. Who are the early adopters in your community or organization? What do they do? Are there any that stick out to you that you could share with us? I'll give you a minute to think about it and share. Tara, I think raised her hand.
Yeah, hi. We just yesterday actually received a really great email from our football club or soccer club. So they're private on our island. But they rent the space from us, and they try to work with us directly in targeting kids that need to be either helped or brought in, or however we can work together as a team. Anyways, we noticed that the girls' soccer registration has decreased. So they're offering at the end of this month a free clinic to any females that are interested in taking up soccer. And I found that interesting because this is a private organization that, you know, heavily relies on the registration and fees, but the coaches have taken the time out of their personal lives to offer this 2-hour clinic for any girl that is interested in the potential of increasing registration in the community.
That's terrific. And was it their observation versus yours?
Initially it was theirs, and then they did come to us and ask how we're finding registration with girls and how it's been turning out. So we now are kind of taking a cue from them, and we're trying to think of ways that we can now offer more girls programs to increase registration, because we find that it might be a barrier. We have, for example, the U12 boy, or they have the U12 boys, they have 4 teams, individual teams, but the girls, they have 1. So why are the numbers so drastically different when the registration is the school? Those numbers don't reflect the same on the field.
Great, as an early adopter for sure. I'm going to share one. Nancy and Krista engaged early adopters in the Gender Equity and Recreation and Sport project. They gathered a group of people across Canada who had shown leadership in this area. We all learned from each other. We were really a reference group to check in with Nancy and Krista along the way. But I think this really moved the project that much further. There was representation across the country. Any others to share?
There is one in the chat box that Denise has shared, that in her community, it's the mayor who has been a really big early adopter, and especially because she happened to have been a competitive gymnast in the past.
Awesome. That's great. Any others? Okay, let's move on. So I think you can expect an early adopter would be a person that cares enough, but you can expect 3 levels of commitment, and all are important. But casting a wide net will allow you to keep a broader population informed, engaged to a certain extent. You'll find that not all probable agencies and staff have the resources or time to be engaged. Fewer people will care enough or care, and fewer people then will care enough. And it's often the 20/80 rule, but typically I've found there's enough to start the momentum, and typically there'll be a few people who care enough and make the difference, as Margaret Mead said. But I think you can categorize often the people that should care, would like to have continued communication and may be engaged to a certain extent. The people who respond to the survey and come to an interview and engage, they obviously do care. But people that care enough are the ones that will volunteer and spend the time to develop the plan and the pilot initiatives. And they come from likely and unlikely sources. So I think the first point about casting a wide net is an important one. The casual observer, I really think this is important. We talked a little bit about casually observing public spaces to see how they're used, and most importantly, who's not using them. Observing public spaces and places is a powerful tool in noting conditions. I personally noticed if the Canadian flag is crisp with no ragged edges, I drive my family crazy doing this actually. I make comments about, the flag's ripped. That can't be good attention to detail. I know you're all going to go and look at your flag outside your building after this, and I hope you do. I observe who's using the spaces. Is it male? Is it female? Is it predominantly a type of age group? Where are the persons with disabilities? How could they be included in the space? I inspect the cleanliness of public washrooms. I look at high above the shoulder where people don't typically reach, and in corners, ceiling vents, etc. Start observing if you haven't already. It provides some very, very valuable information and typically how public spaces are currently being used, and more importantly, who's not using them and what can you do to adapt to make them more comfortable and welcoming. I'll give you an example. In Collingwood, where I live in Ontario, students ride their bikes to one of the waterfront parks to jump off the pier after school. In the summertime, you see all of these kids on their bikes with a towel around their neck going down to the pier. That's a great place for a casual conversation with youth. You'll see them from all backgrounds, and this is just this great ritual that they all do. So by knowing that that's what happens in public spaces, that's another way to engage people in a casual way, but you can get some very valuable information. I'd say record your observations and impressions. How could these places and activities and people help to increase gender equity in sport and recreation? And if you're always connecting the dots, you'll find a way. Thanks. This is a great tool, the International Association for Public Participation. Oh, here we go. Our youth centers often order pizza on a Friday night to get the youth after drop-in sport program. That's great, Nicole. Good time for a youth discussion. The International Association for Public Participation provides a useful and succinct framework, which is in front of you, that outlines the spectrum of the purpose of public participation, the opportunities, and then your promise to participants, which I want to spend a little bit of time on. The framework asks public leaders to ensure that the purpose of the consultation aligns with the approach and follows a continuum from engagement for the purpose of informing to empowered level of decision making. I'd suggest that formulating a plan to address gender equity in sport, the purpose of most and the public participation engagement opportunities would center around informing and consulting to begin with. Remember our key messages. This is what we're doing around female in participation in sport and recreation. This is what we found. This is the data. These are the gaps. It's just gathering people together to inform. But as you move along, the purpose of most public participation engagement opportunities would center around the empowering, collaborating, involving for those that are interested. But let's just take a little minute to go through this in a little detail. To inform, the promises will keep you informed. It's not just a session. If you'd like to hear more, sign up. We'll send you the newsletter. In consulting, the promise is we'll listen to you and acknowledge your concerns. So often I see practitioners are in a consultation phase and they're defending what they've done or what they're about to do. That's not what consulting is about. It's to listen. And involving. So the promise around involving is we'll work with you and ensure that your concerns and aspirations are directly reflected in the decisions we make. And I think careful about your promises, but you're trying to come up with some decision making when you involve people to that greater extent. And then in collaboration, we'll look to you for advice and innovation and incorporate this in decisions as much as possible. So that is working collectively, working together. And then the empowerment phase is we'll implement your decisions or work together to implement your decisions. So I think in terms of engagement and public participation, this is a strong tool. Use it. It really brings that community engagement to the purpose of getting people together and your promise to them.
Claire, just as we move into the next slide, I just wanted to let people know, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, that after the workshop, the slides that have been used today, both in English and in French, will be available on the CPRI website. So you can go there and access them.
Good show. Great. So making in-person online engagement successful. So these are the methodologies. Again, seeking out opinions for those who are not typically participating, i.e. underrepresented marginalized groups. Focus groups with existing stakeholders, again, to inform, engage. Workshops with current and potential stakeholders. Key opinion leader interviews, these are very valuable. Bang the Table, which we'll see a little video about in a minute, which is an online opinion gathering mechanism. Casual discussions to test the importance of gender equity in sport and recreation, where people are, as you know, jumping off that pier in Collingwood. And information gathering from community stakeholder groups, recurrent participation, barriers, the importance of their activities and satisfaction levels, etc. MJ, are we able to do the poll with these as well?
Yes, I'll just pull the poll up now.
So what we'd like to see is how many of these you've utilized in the past successfully or not successfully, how many you've utilized, and we can have that discussion. We'd like to see, you know, what's most common, how many you've used, and we can have a little sharing after that. So hop into the poll. Has everybody participated that's going to? Let's just do a bit of a summary. It looks like casual discussions to test the importance of gender equity seems has been utilized quite a bit. And as well, focus groups with existing stakeholders where we have relationships. Even seeking opinions for those who are not typically participating is higher up than others. Are there any comments about, and just jump in, are there any comments about your successes with using any of these engagement methodologies? Any observations you have?
I'll jump in if nobody's jumping in.
Great.
So we've used all of them. I think my colleagues also on the line as well. We've used all methods, but the most successful are really those that you have a pre-existing or have established a trusting relationship with to get some true, honest feedback. And you can only get that true, honest feedback at the speed of trust. And that takes a long time. And so if your municipality or organization does not invest in relationship building, you will never get that honest, open feedback, and you will only hear from the squeaky wheels and those who feel comfortable engaging with an agency in whatever methodology you've chosen. But it's when you can build those deep, meaningful relationships that you truly get to hear what the community is really thinking or what people are thinking and really have those honest conversations with you. So unfortunately, it's not just a tool, it is actually having a culture that truly believes in relationship building with community.
Absolutely, Denise. And talk to us about that within your organization. Is that supported? Do people have the tools to jump over their desk and meet with new and unlikely partners?
Yes and no. I think, and Jen can jump on too, I'm sure. I'd say we're pretty strong champions of it, but culturally within our organization, and I'm in the municipality of Burlington, for those of you who don't know, and Krista is one of our residents, so she sees all of our online engagement tools, but that corporately they would say use the online engagement tools like Bang the Table, not statistically valid, and you're hearing from one voice. And Jen and I are probably some of the only champions out there suggesting and requiring building relationship. And now I say that Jen and I as staff may feel like that, but the elected officials 100% agree that that's the methodology, but culturally within our corporation, that's not necessarily supported, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I mean, I think you have to have we talked in the previous session around building a strong culture and how you do that. And I think that culture has to be there, absolutely, or else you don't have the tools to feel comfortable engaging unlikely partners. And It's getting more critical. Terry had a comment about the casual conversations. Often you get a more authentic conversation and results. Thanks, Terry. Good show. Thank you. Any other comments on engagement methodologies? Any observations that you've had? Okay, we're just going to share a video about Bang the Table. Oh, sorry. Well, just in case people haven't been engaged in this technology, but it's a way of getting, and not statistically valid, as Denise has said. However, it gives you a sense of what people are thinking. I like the comment, embrace failure. It shows that you're human. Good. MJ, are we able to show that video?
Yes, just one moment.
Okay, doke.
Engagement HQ is a comprehensive community engagement platform designed to promote inclusive, productive, and sustained dialogue through a suite of purpose-built engagement tools, robust communication options, and 24/7 moderation. There are many ways to engage your participants in Engagement HQ, whether it's sharing a photo in the Ideas tool, dropping a pin and answering a question on a community map, or choosing an emoji response to a question in surveys. Engagement HQ delivers the right tools for each consultation, and they're all easy and user-friendly. From an administrator's perspective, Engagement HQ makes it simple to build and manage your engagement site. Appearance Editor presents a suite of flexible design tools, allowing you to customize your site and reflect your brand. On your homepage, you can feature a topic on its own, group a list of common projects in a single section, or enable visitors to browse a full catalog of projects using Project Showcase. And to add important context on your homepage, select from a range of templated and freeform sections to show who's listening, address frequently asked questions, present timelines, and more. To engage on a specific topic, you'd simply create and title a new page, choose an image, and upload your relevant information. Then you'll select your feedback tools based on the nature of your topic, the dialogue you'd like to have, and the phase of your consultation. After typing your prompts into the tools, you can preview and then publish them. Then you can choose a mix of informational widgets to provide context, key dates, or other relevant information. When your project page is finished, the description will clearly state what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how people can get involved. Using multiple engagement tools helps you collect more and richer feedback, and carefully chosen widgets can create trust and transparency in your process. Once you've collected community feedback, you're going to want to make the most of it. With purpose-built reporting and analytic tools on board, you'll be able to make your data actionable. We've made it easier than ever to process large amounts of text-based responses through sentiment analysis, demographic filtering, and a comment tagging interface. Additionally, every project, tool, and data point in Engagement HQ is easily downloadable, allowing you to quickly share reports with participants and decision makers. Engagement HQ's participant relationship management platform makes long-term engagement easy by showing you who you're speaking to, what topics they're interested in, and how they prefer to engage. The PRM also powers our integrated email system, keeping participants informed and closing transparency loops. These complementary functions ensure that with each new project on Engagement HQ, you'll be growing an informed and engaged community who are ready to participate. As you get started, you'll discover that EHQ was built with you and your team in mind. Managing the platform, workflows, and staff capacity is easy and intuitive. You're able to assign different permission levels to team members to help manage the site as a whole, or just work on individual projects. We've also created an easy way to share page preview links to members of your organization without granting administrative access. And if you need to build capacity for your organization, our Engagement IQ services team is available to provide advanced training, practice strategy, or even hands-on implementation. With our marketplace, you'll find additional tools to complement your engagement efforts. We've partnered with some of the best in the community engagement business, offering options for budgeting, SMS, interactive PDFs, a dedicated mobile app, and much more. We believe that data security, both for you and your participants, is critical, and that technical accessibility is foundational to social inclusion. That's why we maintain the highest accreditations for both data security and accessibility, and promise to never keep, sell, or share your information. In addition to our best-in-class community engagement software, most employees at Bang the Table have worked in and with governments across the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. bring real-world experience to the practice of online engagement. We're so glad you're interested in working with us and truly understand that every use case is different. When you're ready to take the next step, we look forward to supporting you in any way that we can.
Great. Sorry for the advertisement. I just wanted people to have an awareness of what Bang the Table or other platforms can offer. I'd also like to watch a video by Nancy Dubois. I had the opportunity and pleasure of interviewing Lisa O'Keefe as part of the development of this workshop series. Lisa was the director of Insight for Sport England, and her job was to understand motivations and behaviors in increasing girls, women, and gender diverse people's participation in sport. Unfortunately, she had, well, not unfortunately, but she has moved on from Sport England. And just as an aside, if you're looking for other resources, Sport England has a tremendous amount of resources and experience with actually getting more women and girls, gender diverse people involved. Sport England's been able to make facility and staff modifications through investments at the local level to increase participation in swimming as well as other sports. Lisa is dynamic. She's an elite athlete in rugby and has true dedication to gender equity in sport and recreation. Lisa will speak about engaging community, what doesn't work, and engaging women of diverse cultures. Thanks, MJ.
Think about engaging the community in physical activity and sport. What are the first 3 things that you would do to engage the community and develop a call to action to support females in sport and recreation?
The first thing I would do, and it sounds daft, but the first thing I would do is just be really clear who it is that I'm looking to engage, who it is that I'm trying to help become more active. I know it sounds silly, but I see a lot of sports and physical activity programs or facilities that are designed for everybody. And as far as I'm concerned, solutions that are designed for everybody are designed for nobody. And actually, probably even worse, not only are they designed for nobody, the people who thrive in those environments are the people who are most comfortable in them, and that's those who are already active. So that's my first message, be really, really clear who it is that you're looking to engage. My second message, and I would say this because I am an Insight director, but I would say invest time and effort in understanding the individuals and the context of their lives. So what I mean by that, first of all, try and understand the individual. So understand their perception of their own abilities, understand their perception of the opportunities available to them to be active, and understand what motivates them. What is it they care about? What is it that they want in their lives? And how does sport and physical activity deliver that for them? So that is very much the individual focus. And for the first few years in this job, I spent all my time focusing on the individual and really understanding capability, opportunity, and motivation. What I realized over time was that is too simplistic a view because we don't live in a vacuum. So you have to understand the context of people's lives. And all of the time now, I take a system approach to understanding people's lives. So I ask myself about the social environment around them, who influences them, who are the people closest to them, what are they doing, what is normal in their environment. I work hard to understand the organizations and institutions who play a role in shaping their thoughts or influencing. So that could be school, it could be work, it could be a religious institution. You know, what are they? I try and understand the physical environment around them. How easy is it for them to access open space, safe places? Are the buildings that are available to them, do they feel welcoming? Would I go in there, you know, or do they feel like there are lots of barriers around them? And then finally, the policy context. So the policy in that place, whether it be local government, whether it be national government, does it support people being active, or does it create more barriers? So investing that time and effort in understanding the individual in the context of their lives really is the solution to all of this, because it opens your eyes then to what it's genuinely going to take to engage those communities, because they are very used to us just dropping in, parachuting in with solutions, and then we're off again. And it doesn't feel like they've been engaged in creating those solutions. And the third message I would say is that once you've really understood the individual in the context of their lives, really collaborate with them to think about what solutions, and work with them to develop the solutions that will overcome those challenges and barriers that they feel, and deliver on those motivations. Tell the story of what you've heard. Show that you care. Really engage them. Have a dialogue in that. When you've developed then the solutions, again, share, because I see lots of examples of really fantastic facilities, programs, campaigns, but often the people we're targeting don't know that they exist, or that they've been designed for them. So you've got to reach out again. And I can't overemphasize enough, engagement takes time, but if you properly engage, first of all, you'll create new solutions, which might be really exciting from a career perspective. You will genuinely feel that energy and excitement from the audiences that you've engaged, and you'll come up with something different that works.
Who were some of your most unlikely partners at the community level in the work that you've done?
Unlikely partners. No, nobody feels unlikely to me, actually. I think the most important lesson we learned is that if you are trying to reach a particular part of the community, you have to go where they are. So if that means you need to go down to a local mosque, or whether that means you need to go down to the local supermarket, or whether that means you need to stand outside the school gates, you need to go where your audience are. We've certainly found with some of our projects in the past, you can do a lot. You can send a lot of messages, and you can talk to a lot of people outside the school gates. And particularly when it comes to, if you're targeting mothers, that is a fantastic location. But we also find that when we're trying to get messages out into the community, there are key individuals within the community who are just really good at taking in information and passing it on. And as simple as it sounds, local hairdressers, if we're working in a community, we often talk to the local hairdressers because they are brilliant. They are on send to every customer who comes in to see them. So that would be my big message, really. Don't think anybody's out of bounds in terms of working with them, but the one criteria you need is, do they have access to the audience you're trying to access? And do they share that desire to see them move more? So if you can find organizations, individuals who buy into what you're trying to achieve, then they are going to be your best advocates, and in a really authentic way, they are going to promote what you're trying to do to the people you're trying to reach.
From all the various initiatives that you've undertaken, from campaigns to the research and such, have you learned anything from things that didn't work?
You learn from things that don't work all the time. I mean, genuinely, whether it be on a grand scale, when I realised that I was spending all my time focusing on how to change the individual and not the whole system around them, whether it be, I mean, actually, when it comes to women and girls, a really good example of where I've learned a massive lesson. I thought in my naivety when I started all of this, that once I understood fear of judgment and I understood the three elements of it, all I had to do was create a campaign where I talked about fear of judgment. I reassured women that they were not the only one who felt like that many of us feel like that, and we all have our version of it. So, it's not just you, it's all of us. And I would create a campaign that said, it's okay, it's not a big deal, this is okay. And I was so wrong, because what I learned is that women who are regularly active still have that fear of judgment. It never goes, but they manage it. I'll give you an example of that. I spoke to a woman about a month ago, and she said to me, she asked me what I did, and I said, well, I'm Insight Director of Sport England. And she said, oh, I don't do any sport. And when I tell people what I do, that's often they feel they need to tell me what they do sport-wise. I don't do any sport, Lisa, that's not my thing. I was like, oh, okay. And I said to her, well, do you do any exercise at all? Do you fit stuff in your day? And she said, oh, yeah. Well, I go out jogging twice a week. And I was like, oh, okay. That feels quite sporty to me, jogging twice a week. And I said to her, how far do you go? And she said, well, I run 4 miles. And I was like, that's a long way, 4 miles. And she said, yeah. She said, actually, my preferred route is 3 miles. But I do 4 because I don't want to run past a row of shops where often there's some kids outside and they laugh at me, or they make a comment about the size of my bum, or they comment about the gear that I'm wearing. So in order to avoid all of them, I do this extra loop, which adds about a mile on. Classic example of managing that fear of judgment. It's exactly the same when a colleague at work says to you, oh, do you fancy joining the gym? And you kind of sort of put them off for a wee while, and then you go onto Google and you try really hard to find pictures of that place. What's it like? Who's in there? What classes are there? You try to imagine yourself in there. These are all the strategies we have for managing that fear, whether it be that appearance, ability, or taking time out for ourselves. So you will find lots of examples of everybody doing that every single minute of the day. And that's the biggest thing I learned. And I often talk about the fact that I got that so wrong, but it's through doing the work that I do and really working hard to try and understand it, that I recognize my mistakes. And I'm the first to talk about them as well, because we only learn. And we're actually trying very hard in our organization to create a culture where people don't fear making mistakes. Because often when we work in the public sector, it feels like if you make a mistake, that's a big deal and you're getting into a lot of trouble for that because we're investing public money. But if we don't try and innovate, if we don't take risks, if we don't try and do things in a different way, we will never achieve our aim here of helping the nation move more. So yeah, I think we should talk more about them and embrace them.
Thank you. We're going to do one more set of breakout rooms, then we're going to take a 10-minute break. Then we'll go on to collective impact, and we're going to share a few promising practices, and then that will be the end of our workshop together. So the next discussion points, we wanted to check in and see what would you consider appropriate organizational actions within your workplace to further females in recreation and sports. So starting from your starting point now, or starting from where you're at, what are the next sort of appropriate organizational actions you feel would be appropriate? And again, we want to hear from everybody around who are the early adopters or champions in your community who could really help you further female participation in sport and recreation. And how have you or how would you reach out to underrepresented females, females with disabilities, Indigenous, females experiencing low income, LGBTQI2S community, BIPOC females, etc. So how have you? We'd love to share what you've done, and that will, and how do you think you could if you haven't? And then we want to talk a little bit more about those unlikely organizations. I mean, Lisa going and talking to hairdressing salons, I thought was really interesting, but maybe there's other unlikely organizations that we're not tapping into our communities. So if you could divide us up into groups again, Nancy, we'll cover those 4 points. I think we'll take, well, probably with 15 minutes in the discussion, and then we'll break out and report back.
Okay, I'm ready to go with the groups. If MJ, you could take group 4, I'll take 1. Krista, you're in 2, and Claire's in 3. Any questions from anybody before I set you loose? Nope. Okay, here we go. And I'll prompt you with some time as we go through with the 15 minutes. Okay, way you go.
Everybody back in the room? Awesome. Sounds like we had some good discussion. We certainly did. MJ, why don't you kick it off in terms of your discussions?
Thank you. I lost my screen for a while. In our group, we had a mix of people from Vancouver, Burlington, and Calgary. And when it came to looking at the appropriate actions, some of the things that we're looking at is like examining the sport facility strategy and the sport network, and trying to get that community engagement to focus on areas of low income or areas that are traditionally marginalized. Some of the other things that is currently ongoing includes a celebration of athletes and also using social media to recognize people, just because you want to not only sort of like do programs, but you want to recognize the efforts in there as well. And for example, in Calgary, we working with partners to understand what they're currently doing and what support that they need on those programs, because the different types of organization have different structures and different compositions, and their needs are very, very different. And some of the programs that were cited, including things like converting a closed concession stand into a gender neutral bathroom, and creating new programs such as boxing gyms and things like that, and even providing transportation for Indigenous peoples to come into town or go to actual program locations. When it came to the talking about early adopters and champions, I think at first we struggled with this, but then as we started to talk about what we're doing and how we reach out, we started to identify who those early adopters are, and they range from organizations that they traditionally will partner with. I think for us, the early adopters and champions sometimes merge with unlikely organizations, for example, treatment facilities, shelters, neighborhood connectors, who are residents who normally would organize activities in their neighborhood, so picnics and things like that. And these are people that they can reach out to and organize programs with them, plan new things, and even spread information of available programs in the neighborhood. And then for the third question is, how would you reach out to the underrepresented groups? And there were different ways that this is done. So through shelters and promoting like free events or free activities and programs through there, but also reaching out to sport fields and promoting subsidized programming. There are a few sports stores where you partner with them to organize physical literacy programs in their space. And that way, if you want to actually purchase the equipment, they're not like top end of the dollar. You can actually afford it. And you've seen how these are used to actually achieve better physical literacy. One thing that we did sort of like touch on, well, two things is, free doesn't always attract people, because people want to feel like they are contributing something back. They don't just always want to take without giving back. And it's a mix of not just the taking and not giving back, but it's also sometimes the shame in just taking something for free. And then we touched slightly on outreach burnouts, particularly for staff members. So if your staff is doing their paid job, but also getting a lot of reach out from other organizations trying to figure out what the heck they should do, that can create burnouts, especially since they're not being paid for that time. So that's just something to sort of like keep at the back of our minds as we plan some of these programs and try to do better. I think that's it.
Great. Good work. Krista.
I have all the folks from out west again, other than Thunder Bay. And I decided to start with question 4 because I never make it through all of them. So we did it the exact reverse. So I'll just tell you in terms of unlikely organizations, religious and other faith organizations is some unlikely organizations, private for-profit organizations, public health, which for some of us have worked a lot with public health, and for some it's a newer organization or entity, and then arts and culture organizations. And one example was a group that does Japanese drumming, and they have a program called Hit Like a Girl. So those were some examples of unlikely organizations. The third question, in terms of reaching underrepresented groups, we talked about looking to make connections with community development organizations who have connections to some of those folks. Who might deal with, and who also deal with organizations and not just individuals. There's a really cool organization in BC called Community, and I actually dealt with them a little bit too, doing a physical activity strategy in BC several years ago. They are not nationwide, but they would definitely, I think, serve people across the country, but very small organization. But anyway, I think I can vouch for the fact that they, again, do some really cool work. Tara had mentioned that they do some queer competency training, and she said it was fantastic in terms of the learning. And then again, other community organizations, multicultural organizations, local diversity, elder advisory groups, and so on. Question 2 around champions. Again, like Denise talked about, the mayor in Saskatoon, a very big champion, and also city councilors, which we were saying is great considering when we were talking about our earlier conversation about when changes are made to recreation services and how the city councilors and mayors are often the ones who get the letters and the angry calls. So great to have those folks being really good champions. In Calgary, there's Sport Calgary, which who does have the benefit of Katrina LeMay-Doan as one of their supporters, top Canadian athlete. So lots of support from there. And Kids Sport. They're not Kids Sport chapters in every province and territory, or in all localities, but again, do some really cool work above and beyond just doing some fundraising. And then school districts and principals who are often great champions, and other teachers and so on. And then the first question around what organizations could use or could do, dedicated resources came up because often some of this work, as important as it is, ends up being done off the side of our desks. And so how do we have funding that can help us do the work, funded properly, and that is sustainable? And representation as well. So Morgan was telling us about how she left her position as the only woman in that position and was replaced by a male. So there's absolutely no representation from women looking at, in that case, ice sports. So that's what we had.
Great. Nancy.
Thanks, Claire. I just wanted to point out in the chat box, there's a couple of things, and one request for MJ that I don't know that you're going to see this, but Paul's put up the URL for the Community, and it's just qmunity.ca, QMUNITY. And then the part of the conversation that just before that in there about newcomers to Canada may not understand how the recreation system even works. And I just wanted to share a story of engagement that happened with a project I was working on over the last 5 years or so in the city of Toronto in priority neighborhoods, where a great percentage of the population is from countries other than Canada. And what it was focused in schools, and what they did is and they had some funding to be able to work with through public health to do this, but the schools would rent school buses during the day and take parents around their community in the neighborhood where they lived, sort of walkable distance, and they would actually take them to the recreation center, get them signed up at the library, get them into the Welcome program, which is the subsidized program fee access service, and take them to the local, if there was a food bank or something like that that they weren't familiar with, and they drive them around so that they felt comfortable to know where these places were and how far away they were, and how to get there. So I thought that was kind of a good connection to what Paul mentioned. And I see that there's another one up there as well from Shane. So our group, I was so thrilled to hear this, and Krista, you're going to be too, that in 2 communities, they actually use this series of webinars as a way to get started in their organizations. They polled who all the people were that had attended one of these sessions and created a small group. They put together kind of a one-pager and treated them like they're early adopters to say, let's get something started here. And lo and behold, there's been some progress made in terms of some of the early steps of increasing awareness and digging into some of their registration data and whatnot. So really good sort of a way to identify who those early adopters might be. Some of the other actions that were mentioned, one was wanting to work towards the gender equity policy for space allocation. And an interesting conversation that we had that ties into something Krista was speaking to as far as the staff go. And it was the idea of walking the walk with the not only the elected officials within council and mayor and such, but also the staffing within the organization, whether it be a municipality or another type, and some of the struggles of even females presenting budget requests that don't get the same airtime or don't get this, they get grilled more than when a similar or a competing request comes from a male counterpart, and just things are still that way. With respect to other early adopters, other than the committee kind of idea, it was taking advantage of people who informally come forward with ideas to pick up on and engaging them then in the next step of, well, let's help us get there, or tell us more about this. In another community, they've created an equity, inclusion, and diversity roundtable of volunteers from the community to draw information from. The reaching out to groups, I won't repeat the ones that we've heard before, but one was libraries came up, as well as grocery stores that are geared towards different ethnic foods. And that's as far as we got.
Terrific. Great. I'll run through ours quickly, and then I have a question to pose to folks about whether we take a break. So think about that. We have about a half an hour left, I guess. So in terms of who the next sort of appropriate organizational actions, there was a sense that we needed to really better understand the impacts of COVID before we got more intentional about certain populations, although the focus will be on the adult market and teens. But because of the pandemic, we've seen a need for more casual and family opportunities. So how will this translate into registration, engagement in recreation? So we need to be mindful of this and be able to pivot if that in fact translates into different types of participation. The early adopters actually came from the sport groups, and the rugby club provided paid coaching courses so that there would be more female coaches throughout all sports. So they showed real leadership there. There's been tried events and paid for courses for Ringette and free programs, so to get people engaged and help out. Reaching out to underrepresented populations, one was the mosques again, and then using GPs to provide prescriptions. This was something we tried in Ontario. I don't know how well it took, frankly, to increase physical activity levels, but it is successful in this application, which was terrific. And then Burlington, which I thought Denise had an excellent example, as part of their corporate strategic plan, they've developed this network of community champions in neighborhoods. So if there's emergency measures that need to occur, these are the point people. But Denise is thinking of using these people around how do we, at the neighborhood level, with these early adopters and influencers, gather those people together to discuss be provided kits and resources around women and female participation in sport and recreation. So I really like that. It's around a strong neighborhood, but it's by neighborhoods and by neighbors. And so I think we've covered mostly, the unlikely partners one I felt was really great and being used in Burlington as food banks. So as you go to the food bank to discuss this is coming up, or we're trying to increase this, these are all the resources, or we can help get people engaged. So that's been a great opportunity. Social services provide seamless approvals for access policy use. And police services through their community relations officers are often very resourceful and know the community. And I think that's what we had to offer as well. Thank you, everyone. I just have a quick question. We have a 10-minute bio break and stretch scheduled. And then the last portion of the workshop is just talking about collective impact, and then talking through some sharing, some promising practices that we've seen throughout Canada. We'll have to cut things short if we take 10 minutes. Do you want to take 5 minutes and come back, or no break at all? What are your thoughts? Should we take a show of hands? No break, we see from Nicole. Any other input? How about a show of hands for those who want to take a break? Fine with no break from Donna-Lee. Should we just soldier on then? I think we have about 25 minutes left, and I'll speak really quickly. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. I want to talk about collective impact, and it's really an approach to working with organizations within your community around complex social issues. So the approach involves a clear definition of the issue, the development of a vision where everybody can play their part, everybody does what they do best in contributing to the initiative, and of course they measure their work. So it supports the notion that we're stronger together, and if done successfully, it involves the clear definition of the issue. I like to add one point, is that if you're working together with a group of organizations and representatives, talk about your culture first, because everybody's coming from different cultures and you need an appropriate culture that's going to see your work through. So what are the values that you all admire? What are the behaviors that go along with those values? And what are the unacceptable behaviors? Because when you're coming through, there can be, working together, there can be power struggles, et cetera, but just develop a really nice, innovative, high-performing culture. It's really an unset set of rules around the work together. I think that's job one, frankly. Okay, we can move on to the next. And this is a quick video around collective impact and what it involves.
The number and complexity of challenges facing our world can be overwhelming. When individual organizations attempt to tackle the most daunting problems, success stories are all too rare. Many innovative approaches have been tried, too few have worked. However, when organizations work together under the right conditions, they can accomplish great things. One particularly effective means of collaboration is collective impact. Using the collective impact approach, a number of complex social challenges have been addressed and some remarkable results have been achieved. Youth incarcerations dropped by 45% in just 3 years, with no change in public safety, improving the lives of thousands of youths. 6,000 public housing residents were placed in new jobs during the recession. More than 1,000 acres were restored and over 280 million pounds of pollution voluntarily reduced to conserve and restore a river. Organizations utilizing a collective impact approach do the following: agree to a common goal, agree to track progress in the same way, which allows for continuous improvement, do what each does best while identifying new ways to work together, have consistent communication, and finally, have skilled and dedicated resources to support ongoing efforts. The world's toughest challenges aren't going away. In fact, many experts predict they will continue to grow in both number and complexity. Solving these problems requires a range of expertise from a number of diverse organizations. Collective impact is a proven approach, helping organizations work together to move mountains.
Great. Nancy, could you skip to the next slide? This really covers both. But the 5 conditions of collective impact, which we've just heard about, developing the common agenda, and the decision to work together with a community, engaging organizations and experts would really, you can include those likely and unlikely partners at this stage. The shared measurement is what we talked about in terms of collecting the right data, setting up systems to collect ongoing data, and then really ensuring that people do what they do best. So communication, you would look at the skills and competencies that you need at the table. Is it communications? Is it data collection? Is it community engagement? Is it programming on the ground, etc.? So get the right people at the table. The continuous communication is a given. We need to be kept engaged and involved and understand what those next steps will be. And having that backbone support, one of the organizations to assist with administration, with applying for grants, with reporting out to agencies, etc. So this is really simply put, but these are the 5 conditions. And again, I would back up the common agenda by developing the culture of this collective. It's critical. I'm going to move on to some promising practices and examples that I've come across that have dealt with both seeing a gap in communities, engaging through community engagement, and collective impact. So the first one I want to share is called Black People Will Swim. And this organization, it's actually a business, was founded by Paulana. Oops. I've gone black. I've gone. Are we connected? I don't seem to be.
We still see you and hear you, Claire.
Oh, do you really? That's interesting. My camera's gone and my 2 screens are black, but listen, I'll continue on. Do you mind indulging me for a minute while I catch up on paper? Very strange. Okay. Paulana Lamonnier has a goal to teach at least 2,000 Black people how to swim. She was discouraged from achieving her goal due to some misinformation about why Black people wouldn't respond to her mission. Some of the fallacies were around hair care and body densities, and she speaks very candidly about this. She wanted to smash these stereotypes, as she puts it, and created some classes that provided safe environments, such as Go Best Friend, which is a class that friends sign up together. And I thought that was a great idea. If you go with your best friend, you'll be encouraging and you'll be happy and you'll have a great time. And as well, there was another class that centered on families and friends coming as a group, and again, in a very safe, encouraging environment. She also partnered with hair care companies to provide hair protection, hair care products, hair care classes on how to protect the people's hair. She hasn't been back in the pools in a bit because of the pandemic, but she's hoping to pick up in the late spring after that delay. So I thought that was really encouraging. She was assisted in terms of pool time in the community. So she really engaged people to say, is this a viable business in her case? Can I gather? So she saw a gap and responded. Advancing affordable access to recreation in Durham was an excellent collective impact initiative. So there are 9 municipalities. They all work together with Dr. Gina Brown in terms of research of the impact of providing recreation to people who are experiencing low income. And they actually got all of the regional councillors to sign an engagement letter that spoke to what they were setting about to achieve. And what they wanted to do was ensure that the same number of people experiencing low income participated as the mainstream. So if there was, they set a target of 15% of the population engages in sport and recreation, then they wanted to ensure that 15% of those living below the lower income measure could do the same. They developed a plan and a strategy. They meet collectively once a month. They measure their progress. This is classic collective impact model. They also received $550,000 from the Poverty Research Fund to further their work and further measure their work in Durham. So that was an awesome initiative that I think started about, I would say, 7 or 8 years ago and continues today. Rec on Wheels, so Hockey for the Homeless is an organization that works with communities to develop a hockey tournament, and the funds raised from the hockey tournament offset costs to provide supports for the homeless. This is quite an impressive work, and I know Krista was involved in this, but they also have Rec on Wheels that goes around to homeless shelters for youth. And I know it was delayed because of the pandemic, but I think it will be back together soon. Stomp is an urban dance competition. Stomp started in Toronto, and it's an urban dance competition in the early, I'm just trying to think, 2000s. And this was started by the same Michelle, youth worker that I was talking about earlier in the presentation. So the youth workers got together with youth groups across the city and asked what was missing, what would they like to see more of. And they said, you know, we want to dance and we want a dance competition. So the youth workers worked collectively with dance studios, gave free time in terms of community space. And they have, I think they have about 24 dance groups from across the city, and they have an annual competition called Stomp. And this was also done by engaging and developing with other partners within the community. And I think MJ is going to show us a video.
Drama center for the arts, how y'all doing out there? Make some noise, make some noise. Let the drama kick, let the drama kick die. Let the drama kick, let the drama kick die. Whatever you do, let the drama kick. This is 2007. Let the drama kick die. Let the drama kick, let the drama kick die. 700 people in here. Make some noise.
Make some noise, man.
It's gonna be hot. It's gonna be hot.
You gotta shake your ass.
Take a tambourine, go and get yourself a whistle.
Okay.
Take a tambourine, go and get yourself a whistle.
Okay.
Take a tambourine, go and get yourself a whistle. Take a tambourine, go and take a tambourine, go
I go by the name of Swiss Beast the Monster. We gonna get this party started. Full service. Let's go.
EVE come through in the minds of pride. Doing it big like I live in the Taj Mahal. Talk shit, I don't get in the blase blah. That's why they loving her. That's real, been the chick that they talked about. Goddamn is the words that come out their mouth. She look good always, without a doubt. Ask for it, yeah, she back and caking out. Come on. They be watching while we wiggle around. Look at them drooling. Niggas, they ain't used to the sound. I keep them moving. All my ladies, put your hands in the air. It's all right now. We gon' keep you up on your feet the whole night now. Pop them bottles, yeah, drink that up, man. Got you feeling crazy? Well, that was the plan. They was waiting for me, wasn't ready for this. He got the game sold up. No, I'm talking about Swiss. So yeah, I know you wanna fight it, but why would you try? We got them shaking everything from the hood to Dubai. Yeah, we do it big, man. Why would we lie? Come on.
1, 2, 3, everybody.
Pick up, get your hands in the air, it's a stick up, shake your tambourines, move it quicker, yeah, I'm shaking down the town, get the picture, moving on the floor, gotta love that, how she keep it going on, gotta love that, to the beat like a pro, know you love that, she can shake it to the flow, gotta love that, get your ass on the dance floor, dance on the dance floor, move them out the way if they ain't doing it how you want yours, you ain't got the ass, keep giving more, don't need my permission, y'all heard, what you waiting for?
You get the idea that this came from engaging youth across a large community and setting up this network of support to see this through, and it will continue post-COVID for sure. The next example I wanted to share was around Canadian Tire Jumpstart and their Play from Home project, and this was a result of COVID. But they are a true partner in the endeavor to attain gender equity in sport and recreation. And as we discussed today, it'll take multiple interventions at multiple levels, and Jumpstart's playing their part in providing Learn To opportunities for young girls. And as a matter of fact, some of the municipalities we're working with have said that they will continue with online experiences and in-person experiences to determine where the preferences are and where they need to pivot to. just in summarizing the workshop today, we talked about gathering data, relevant data, developing key messages, knowing what your next steps are and who to engage, the notion of collective impact, which I think is important. We didn't spend enough time on it, but I think it's something that would really work in communities around this issue. And of course, we just shared some promising practices. Just again, a good number of very helpful resources can be found through the Canadian Women in Sport. So please do look up their website and utilize those. Those resources, they will be very helpful. I'm going to pass it on to Nancy to talk about wrap up and next steps and the evaluation.
Thanks, Claire. I just wanted to do a couple of quick things here at the end. One is to encourage you to complete the evaluation for today's workshop. We have been very fortunate at CPRA to have received another grant to be able to continue this work. And MJ has just put the link into the chat box for the SurveyMonkey. It's very short, but we will have the opportunity to continue on with these training sessions perhaps in a different way or different topics, and we would love your input to this. Secondly, I want to reinforce the toolkit that has come along with this project, as well as the bench resource that you heard Aaron speak to earlier. We will be creating, as part of this next phase of work beginning next month in April, to put together a community of practice, or maybe several of them, and the input that you shared earlier with respect to where you are on your journey through gender equity. We may have different communities based on what people are wanting to talk about or share. So you can stay tuned for that kind of announcement as well. And then you've seen some additional thoughts. And if you have anything that you'd like to put into the chat box now, as far as things that you're wanting to see in the future, wanting to see more of, or any shifts from what we have done for today, that would be great. I think I just wanted to share with you a picture of the, there's the Menti thing on the survey, so you can take it with your phone right now if you wanted to, or you could go to the link that's in the chat box. Here's just a quick snapshot of the toolkit. It has all kinds of different resources in addition to the webinar series or the workshop series that we've delivered over the last 6 months or so. So all the recordings and slides will be in there, as well as the full interviews with our guests. So you saw Lisa O'Keefe from Sport England today. We also have one with a couple of people from Sport Nova Scotia and a woman from Aurora as well. So the full interviews are on there if you'd like to check those out. I think that takes me to the end of today. So I just want to finish off with some quick thank yous. First of all, to Claire. There's been a whole series of these sessions, and Claire, you've done such a great job in adapting it, but also integrating your own experiences and the theory and research behind all this. So thank you so much. And to MJ and Krista, who are our colleagues in the back world behind all of this, thank you. But most of all, thank you to all of you for taking the time. This is a significant investment for you to take for the 3 hours today, and many of you I know have been part of some of the other workshops as well. So thank you, and it's really heartening to hear that that some of this stuff is really making its way into your daily practice and shaping how you're doing things. We would love to hear more about those kinds of things, the stories and the examples as we move forward through the communities of practice or the other aspects of the toolkit. So I'll end it here and just ask if Claire, Krista, or MJ, if there's anything else any of you would like to add.
Nothing more from here.
No, Nancy, other than to thank you, who has put so much time and effort into this as well. And I'm thrilled that we'll be continuing this journey together over the next couple of years. So thanks for everything.
Great. You're welcome. Okay, thank you, everybody. Go on about your day, whatever time it is, and it is exactly 3 o'clock by my clock. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
thank
folks.
you.
Bye now.